Chapter 43. The calm before everything changes. Time skip home, a few days later. Scrolland Shield. Alisa's and Steve's POV. Alisa was sat at her table as she reads her grim diaries, as Steve was sat on the other side, drawing Portland and Alisa. Steve puts down his pencil and looks at Alisa for a moment before speaking. After everything that happened, I'm surprised no one is interrupting this moment. Alisa looks up to him. I know, I'm just expecting someone to knock on. Steve thinks for a moment as his fingers absent-mindedly brushes across the page of his drawing. I think, he starts slower than usual. We're just between things. I mean, we're still dealing with his doppelganger situation. Alisa looks at him carefully. Between. He nods once as he looks down at his sketch. Portland skyline blending into Alisa's silhouette without him even realizing he'd done it. He then looks back to Alisa. Yeah, like the world's taking a breath before it decides what to throw at us next. Alisa closes her diary softly, her thumb resting between the pages like she's not ready to let it go. She looks at the page, then back at Steve. That's not comforting. Steve chuckles slightly. Wasn't meant to be. There was silence, but not empty. It was just waiting. Then Alisa's expression shifts slightly. Not fear or panic, but recognition. Steve, she says quietly. He's looking at her again after closing his sketchpad. You feel it. She nods. Something's coming. Steve leans back in his chair, exhaling through his nose as he's not surprised, just accepting it. Yeah, he murmurs. I think I already knew that. Time skip, New York City. Robot face. Tony's POV. Outside, the city didn't sleep. Instead, it vibrated. Engines, distant sirens, the low thrum of a world that refused to slow down for anyone. Tony stood by the glass, one hand curled loosely around a drink he hadn't touched. His eyes weren't on the skyline. They were somewhere else entirely as he knows he has to go there. Portland. He exhales through his nose, already running through the conversation in his head on how this was going to go, how Rogers was going to look at him, how much convincing it would take, which is probably none. His jaw tightened slightly. Jarvis, he says, not turning. Prep the jet, wheels up first thing. Of course, boss, Jarvis replies smoothly. Tony's grip tightens just a fraction around the glass before he sets it down, untouched. Tomorrow was already in motion, whether they like it or not. Chapter 44. From Kisses to Combat. Time skip home. The living room was quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of paper as Alisa slid the last of the novels onto the shelf. She looked up just as Steve reached the bottom of the stairs, his hair still messy from sleep and his shirt slightly rumpled. Finally awake, she teased, her voice dropping to a near whisper that seemed to vibrate in the small space between them. Steve let out a tired H-rumph, but Alisa was already moving into his space. She didn't stop at a polite distance. She leaned into him, stopping just inches away until the air between them felt thick. You're a mess, she murmured. She reached up to straighten his collar, her fingers grazing the skin of his neck. Even after the fabric was flat, she didn't pull away. She maintained the contact, letting her thumb brush against his jawline for a few seconds longer than necessary, her gaze locked onto his. Better, he asked, his voice a bit rougher than before. Almost. Alisa interrupted her own thought to simply look at him, her expression focused and heavy with an intent that had nothing to do with books or morning coffee. Her eyes dropped, briefly glancing at his lips before snapping back up to his eyes. What? Steve challenged softly, a smirk playing on his mouth. You think you're pretty charming, don't you? She countered, a playful challenge in her tone. What are you going to do about it? Before he could answer, she reached up, cupping his face and resting her hand on the back of his neck, pulling him down into a short kiss on the corner of his mouth. It was soft, hesitant for only a heartbeat before it lingered, deepening into something hungry and certain. She broke away just enough to breathe, guiding him toward the couch. Let's get more comfortable, she breathed against his lips. They sank onto the cushions, the world outside the living room disappearing. Steve's hands found her waist, pulling her against him as the kiss turned frantic and hot. Alisa's fingers tangled in his hair, her heart hammering against her ribs, the heat between them building into a fever pitch that drowned out everything else. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was sharp, sudden, and entirely too loud. They both froze, foreheads resting against each other, chests heaving. Steve closed his eyes, letting out a long, tortured groan into the crook of her neck. "Ignore it," he rasped. "Knock, knock. Steve, Alisa, you guys in there?" Alisa let out a breathless, frustrated laugh, pulling back just enough to smooth her hair. "Duty calls," she sighed, though she didn't look happy about it. Steve let out one last frustrated sigh, running a hand through his already disheveled hair, and only making the just rolled out of bed and into a make-out session look 10 times more obvious. Alisa stayed on the couch for a heartbeat longer, her face flushed a deep, telltale crimson before she stood up to smooth out her clothes. Steve pulled the door open, bracing himself. Standing on the porch, leaning casually against the doorframe with a smirk already tugging at his mouth, was Clint Barton. Clint's eyes did a quick, professional sweep. He took in Steve's erratic hair, the slightly off-center collar Alisa had just been fixing, and then glanced past Steve to see Alisa, who was pointedly interested in a pile of books on the coffee table. "Am I interrupting a strategy meeting?" Clint asked, his tone dripping with mock innocence. "Because you look like you've been losing a wrestling match, Cap." Steve cleared his throat, trying and failing to reclaim his professional soldier persona. "Clint, what are you doing here?" Clint's expression sharpened, the humor fatting into something more serious. "Duty calls. Stark's been tracking the scepter. We've got a lead on a HYDRA research base in Sokovia. Strucker is there, and he's got the prize. We're assembling the team back in New York tonight." The heavy reality of the mission settled over the room, cooling the remaining heat of the afternoon. Steve nodded, his jaw setting. "I'll pack my gear." "Actually," Clint added, looking over at Alisa and giving her a friendly, welcoming nod. "The offer extends to the guest of honor. Word's gotten around the team about Alisa, and the others are dying to actually meet the woman keeping the first Avenger busy. Hill says she can stay at the tower while we're deployed. It's got better security than this place, and frankly, Tony's already started a betting pool on whether or not you're real." Clint winked at her. "Pack a bag, Alisa. It's time you met the rest of the circus." Chapter 45. Stay until we come back. Time skip. Helicarrier to New York. The flight to New York was a blur of tactical briefings and the low hum of the helicarrier's engines. Steve sat beside Alisa, his hand occasionally finding hers in a silent anchor, while across the aisle, Tony and Natasha were already deep into the logistics of the Sokovia raid. There was an unspoken understanding in the air, the kind that only comes from people who have shared strange coffee in Portland kitchens or faced down ghost stories in DC hospitals. The helicarrier docked with the massive landing pad of Avengers Tower, the glass and steel reflecting the late afternoon sun. As the ramp lowered, the group was met by the sterile, high-tech scent of the hangar bay. Tony stepped off first, his sunglasses on even though they were indoors. "JARVIS, tell the kitchen to prep a protein-heavy meal for the team and whatever Alisa wants. She's the only one here with actual taste." "Welcome back, sir," JARVIS's voice smooth and omnipresent. "And welcome, Alisa. It is a pleasure to see you again." Natasha walked beside Alisa, her stride purposeful. She gave Alisa a small, knowing smirk, the same one she'd given her in that black Corvette back in DC. "Don't let Tony bully you into any scientific tests while we're gone," Nat warned quietly. "He's still obsessed with the Beaver repairman incident." "I heard that," Tony yelled over his shoulder. "And for the record, Bud is a miracle worker. My coffee has never been better." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The casual banter died down as they entered the communal floor. A massive holographic display of the Sokovia base flickered to life in the center of the room. Tony stepped toward his workshop, the mechanical arms already beginning to assemble the Mark 43 around him. 2. Natasha headed for the armory, checking the charge on her widow's bites and sliding her batons into place. She caught Alisa's eye and gave a sharp, respectful nod. She knew Alisa could handle herself, even in a tower full of egos. 3. Thor and Bruce were already near the Quinjet, the former checking the weight of Mjolnir, and the latter looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Steve turned to Alisa, his Captain America suit already on, the shield magnetically locked to his back. He looked every bit the fossil Natasha liked to tease him about, but his eyes were entirely present. "Hill is on her way up to give you the full tour," Steve said, his voice dropping an octave as he took her hands. He didn't care who was watching. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers for a brief, quiet second. "The others are looking forward to a real dinner when we get back. Just stay within the tower's security. Jarvis has my direct line if anything feels off." 60 seconds, Cap," Clint shouted from the cockpit of the Quinjet, his eyes shifting to the pair with a smirk. "Save the romance for the victory party." Steve gave Alisa's hand one last squeeze before turning and jogging up the ramp. The Quinjet's engines whined, a high-pitched roar that vibrated through the floorboards. Alisa stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching as the jet lifted off the pad, retracted its landing gear, and screamed into the New York sky, heading toward the snowy forests of Sokovia and the start of a much larger fight. The tower was suddenly very quiet. "Miss Alisa," Jarvis spoke up, breaking the silence. "Agent Hill is currently in the elevator. In the meantime, would you like me to display the current news from Portland, or perhaps a book from the library?"